This conference will now be recorded.
And with that, thank you for starting the recording, clerk. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to you, Paul. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, City Council. Tonight's workshop is the last workshop on your 2021 budget. And tonight we've got a couple things to cover. The primary focus is on the revenue side, both the property tax levy and the proposed solid waste and recycling utility tax. But also wanted to check in on the preliminary budget review. We've got the budget coming forward to you at your next meeting for public hearing and potential adoption, and so wanted to check in on that as well. I've got about 20 slides, and I apologize for the last minute change. Hopefully you're all linked in, got linked into the correct report if you pulled it off, but I'm presenting the presentation that I'm going to go through was updated actually this morning. We got some updated information from the assessor's office over the last 2 days and wanted to make sure we incorporated that both into the presentation for you tonight, but also into the public hearing presentation that'll be part of the council meeting later on. So I've got about 20 slides and I think I can get through them fairly quickly, although I always seem to say that. So just to put the current meeting in context, we've had a number of workshops. I think there was one even before September on some of the financial updates. But this is the workshop right now, the public hearing on revenues and the property tax levy. If you recall, the end of October, we went through the preliminary budget in that workshop. And then next on the calendar is a December 2nd meeting. And as I mentioned before, the proposed public hearing and the budget adoption would be on that agenda. We have made the preliminary budget available on the website. It was provided to you on November 2nd, and it's been on the website since that date. We will also make available the final budget that'll be subject for the public hearing available. Hopefully that'll be posted tomorrow. There's a public notice that's being posted this week and next week regarding that public hearing and letting people know the budget's available. So that's where we are in the process. As I mentioned, the primary focus tonight is on the property tax levy, specifically at the council meeting, and wanted to go through some of the information that'll be presented there with you in advance. The public hearing tonight is actually a dual public hearing. It's covering two purposes. The primary purpose is a state requirement that you hold a public hearing on revenue sources prior to passing your property tax levy. So while the emphasis is on the property tax, it also covers other current expense or other revenue sources that support current expenses. And as I mentioned, it's sort of a dual purpose. We're covering the public hearing for the ordinance that's required before you consider your ordinance as well. Just as a refresher, here's the chart on the revenues. This was included in the preliminary budget. No specific changes here to note. The percentages of the total revenue are shown down the right-hand side. The budget amounts are here. The dollar amount and percent change over the 2020 estimate is shown to the right of the budget column. Excuse me. I do have an update. Last Friday, the county treasurer sent out an update, and their data suggests that the collections for the 2020 property tax are coming in quite strong. In fact, $494,000 is the amount that she shows for the city of Ridgefield, excuse me, the city of La Center. That's compared to our estimate of $481,000. So the collections have been 98% to date. Our budget estimate assumed a 95% collection rate. There's still about $7,000 left over, give or take, and they're going through their collection process to try and get those payments in before year end. But there's likely that some of that revenue will flow over into next year.
Okay.
So,
Paul, this is Doug. I have a question about that report. I'm looking at
Sure.
it now. She's also got a figure under the column adjustments of 985. Can you explain to me what that is?
you know, I don't know specifically what those are, but there are often things like whether it's somebody has an appeal that gets settled, there are adjustments that happen during the year to the amount. The other thing I noted is that they're using the base levy as their receivable. There's also, you had a large amount of administrative adjustments, administrative refund is what they call them, over $4,000. It's not tracked in that spreadsheet. So that's why our budget's a little bit higher than what they showed as the full receivable for the year, because we have that additional money. So there's a little mystery to me in terms of what all she's tracking in that spreadsheet. But
Okay, thank you.
so good news on the property tax, and really the focus of the public hearing tonight will be the property tax revenue. So other than that, no other things really to note in terms of changes from what you saw at the October 28th meeting. Just another pie chart. I think we also included this at the last workshop, showing the distribution of revenues. 63% are taxes, 37% are really sort of the local taxes, not including the gambling tax. And I will note that that 37% really compares to 65% or more of what other jurisdictions collect from their local taxes, not including the gambling tax. Obviously, the other cities don't have as large a revenue source from their gambling tax as their local gambling tax. And again, the property tax this year looks like it's the second largest source. In 2020, the retail sales tax may beat out the property tax to be the second largest, but it's a significant revenue source for your general fund operations. A little bit of context for that property tax is that the bill that is put out includes tax revenue for a number of state and local jurisdictions. Of the total property tax rate in La Center of $11.21 this last year, the city of La Center was just over $1 and represented roughly 10% of that total. The largest share goes to K-12 schools, and the largest share of that goes to the local school district. And those are all voted levies, so those are things that are imposed at the approval of the voters. The state schools, if you recall, this is going through a couple of iterations in response to some legislative changes. They're on a 5-year plan that was approved in 2017. And then you're somewhat unique in that part of your jurisdiction falls in the Port of Ridgefield. I don't have them on this pie chart. If you're curious, their levy rate was 17 cents last year. And then there are also parts of your city that don't fall under the Cemetery District 6 jurisdiction, so they don't have that very small levy as part of their property tax bill. There are a couple different limits that are involved with the property tax in the state of Washington for local jurisdictions. The first sort of headline note is that it's not rate-based. So the property tax in Washington is levy-based, not rate-based as it is in Oregon. In addition, because of some of the initiatives that have been passed over the years, state law limits the increase, the annual increase in the levy from year over year to 1%, or the increase in the implicit price deflator for jurisdictions that are over $10,000. Plus, you're allowed to have a levy increase for amounts attributed to new construction, annexations, and utility property value, those when those are increased. There's actually 2 calculations that are done under the levy limit. A little bit arcane, but it carries forward your highest lawful levy from 1986, which is almost always your levy from last year. But in our instances, I'll get into in a minute, it's actually the levy that's calculated from last year, not the actual levy from last year. The second limit, third limit, is this rate limit. And in state law, there's a limitation on city property tax levy rates of $3.60. And if you're covered by a fire district, they're allowed to collect their maximum property tax rate of $1.50. And if you're in a library district, their maximum property tax rate is 50 cents. So if you take those $1.50 and 50 off of your 360, your maximum property tax rate is $1.60. If you looked at it this last year, because both the fire district and the library district were below their maximums, your de facto maximum is really $1.76. So it's a real-time look at what their levy rates are before they decide what your maximum levy rate. But the $1.60 is typically a safe number that takes into account their those other jurisdictions at their maximum rates. And again, as I mentioned, it's not a rate-based levy. The levy rate is actually a math derived. It equals the levy that's in the numerator divided by the total assessed value, which is determined by the county assessor. And I'll show you the math here. We'll go through this in a little bit of detail. The first thing to note is that the assessed value is the estimated market value as determined by the assessor as of January 1st, 2020. So there's this at least a year lag in terms of their valuation from an assessment standpoint and the market valuation that you'd see in the marketplace. The assessed value that we started with, so the 2019 assessed value for 2020 taxes was $476 million. For 2021 taxes, there's appreciation that was determined from last year of just over $32 million, roughly 6.7% appreciation in your assessed value. And then there's the new construction that we've talked about before, fairly significant, 28.4 million, which represents a 6% increase in your overall assessed value. And then you had a number of annexations this year, adding 2.4 million. And again, one of the numbers we just got yesterday was the increase in the state assessed utility values, and that went up 643,000. So your total taxable assessed value for 21 taxes is $539.8 million. And you can see that's a significant increase over where you were last year. And it's represented by these different elements. Now in the numerator, so that's the denominator. In the numerator, we start with, in your instance, the highest lawful levy of $502,172. And this was the highest lawful levy calculated since 1986. You're allowed a 1% increase on that amount. And then you're allowed new construction value at last year's levy rate. So we take this $28.4 million, multiply it by last year's levy rate, and add that levy amount to last year's levy. And then the same kind of thing with the utility value gets us a $684 increase. The annexations are calculated a little bit differently, but a similar methodology adds $2,400. And then there's these administrative adjustments, as I mentioned before, this year, over $4,000. In 2020, over $4,000. Next year, it'll be just under $600. So the calculated numerator would be $541,078. Your levy rate's going to fall from $1.06 down to just below, just above $1, $1.02. So any questions on how the levy amount is determined or the levy rate is determined? Tried to show you as much information as we have available to pull that together. If not, I'll proceed to go through a couple of different trend graphs. These don't have to spend a lot of time on. This shows you your new construction value going back to 2006. Again, want to show your 28.4 million for 2021, an increase over last year, and represents the highest new construction amount since 2007. You can see the Great Recession impacts on development activity in La Center through the 2008 to 2018 period. This graph shows you the property tax levy, so the total levy amount and the levy rate over time. And I like to show this just because it shows that the levy actually can go down in times when the assessed value is shrinking and shrinking fairly rapidly. So you've got this statutory maximum levy rate of $1.60 that we talked about before, and you actually hit that amount in the recession because the denominator, the assessed values, shrunk so much at the beginning of the Great Recession. And you can see your levy actually went down. It was 365 and 570 in 2010 and was 359, 303. It slowly recovered since that point, but your rate hit $1.60 and stayed there for 2 years. And then as appreciation grows faster than 1%, the numerator only grows by 1%. If the denominator grows by more than 1%, the levy rate actually trends down. And you can see you're at your lowest levy rate over the last 15 years. More trend information. I show this, the blue bar in the left-hand axis shows the percentage change in the appreciation or depreciation, as the case may be, of the assessed value. So the 6.7% is what we showed you before in the appreciation. And you can see in the Great Recession, the valuations dropped considerably over, I think total this is 35% over those 5 years. And when that happens, so this large amount of depreciation in the assessed value allows the levy rate to go up. So you were well below your $1.60, but because of that decline in the assessed value, you rapidly went up to hit your cap. And as the appreciation grew, and in years when the appreciation is high, that levy rate falls fairly quickly over time. And you can expect that to continue. And one of the reasons this is important is that you do have the ability to ask the voters for a levy lid lift that would allow you to increase more than the 1%. And that is the difference between this dollar, where you're at now, and the $1.60 statutory maximum rate. This graph shows you the median home price trend, and this data comes from the Center for Real Estate Research out of the University of Washington, and this is the Clark County overall. Just to give you a sense, they're showing appreciation at about 4.5% in the second quarter of 2020 versus 2019, median home price of $388,500. Show you some regional multiple listing service and Zillow data here just to compare you to some of your neighbors. I guess the takeaway is your valuations are typically a little bit higher than the countywide average, a little bit higher than Woodland, but a little bit lower than Ridgefield. And I thought it was interesting just to look at the activity too. 107 closed sales through the end of September. So those homes that are being built are selling. I'm guessing a good share of those are new homes, but it includes new and existing homes as well. Okay. This graph shows you what the city property tax would be on that median priced home. So it takes that University of Washington Center for Real Estate Research valuation data and applies your levy rate, the city levy rate, to that valuation. And you can see not a whole lot of change over time. And in fact, a decrease 395 to 389. Again, this is using that countywide median home price information and applies your dollar per thousand levy rate to that for 2021. But about $389, a little over a dollar a day, I guess, for a typical household in terms of the property tax payment that actually goes to the city of La Center. So that's all I had on the property tax. I don't know if there are any questions on that. The I'll summarize the ordinance when we get to the end of the workshop presentation, but effectively, we're just going to ask you to approve a 1% increase in the property tax levy over this year for next year. So, if not, I'll move on to the utility tax. So the city implemented a 6% tax on most utilities back in 2018, and this was in response to a fairly significant, a $1.8 million reduction in the gambling taxes from what was over $3 million to 1.3 million. What I show you on the graph is the revenues over the last 4 years from those those utility excise taxes. And you can see the largest is the electricity, bringing in just over 100,000. Some of the other taxes represent somewhat smaller amounts, and have layered on the proposed solid waste and recycling utility tax for the 2021 budget. And that 36,000 represents 9 months worth of an estimated 9 months worth of collections. The total revenue from the utility tax in 2020 is estimated at 265,000. So it's not one of the top 2 revenue sources, top 2 or 3, but it's providing a significant revenue source. Didn't really make up a significant amount of that $1.8 million reduction, but it certainly has helped out.
Paul,
Yeah.
on the telephone tax, is that for landline only, or does that include cell phone?
It includes cell phones.
Okay, thank you.
So the proposal for the solid waste and recycling utility tax is, again, to implement that at the same rate as your other utility taxes at 6%. I believe it was inadvertently omitted. It was part of the prior discussions with council, but it was not included in the ordinance that you ultimately approved. It is a tax on the gross revenue of the service provider. Most often, Waste Connections shows that on the bill as a pass-through, so they collect it from the utility customers. All Clark County cities except Camas impose this at a minimum of 10%. Again, 45,000 would be our guess for the annual amount, 36,000 for 9 months. Although it's possible that this could be implemented earlier. You will have an ordinance implementing this tax also at your December 2nd meeting as part of your actions related to in advance of considering the budget. If the monthly bill is about $28 a month, the tax would equate to about $1.70. 28 is the typical 32-gallon can once a week with recycling and yard debris. But the tax would also apply to all services provided to commercial and government customers, including school district, the city, and others as well. So this just shows you the rates in the other local jurisdictions. 28.9% in Vancouver, 10% in most other places, Woodland at 12.5%. And if you look more broadly, 141 cities that responded to the Association of Washington Cities 2020 survey said they implemented it. The median was 6% and the average was 9.2%. A couple of cities have a very high tax rate on garbage in their cities. So that's it on the revenue sources. Any questions on the proposed solid waste and recycling utility tax? We put this at sort of a 3-month lag in terms of the estimates, thinking there might be a need for some time to get it implemented. My understanding from talking to Maria is that it can be implemented much more quickly. We won't necessarily propose a fixed date of April 1 for an implementation. It'll be implemented as soon as possible in 2021. So if there aren't any questions, I'll move on to the preliminary budget. Again, this is the general fund revenue. Primarily want to get your feedback with any questions, any outstanding issues that you have regarding the budget. Again, we sent out the preliminary budget to you on November 2nd. It'll be on your agenda for adoption after the public hearing on December 2nd. There's the revenue sources. Sure if you've got any questions about these. I know with the continued issues with the COVID, the 3 months of, the 9 months of collections for the gambling tax. I guess every month that goes by that becomes more of a question, but I think it's still a best guess that we'd like to use. On the expense side, we do have one adjustment that we'll be making for the budget that you see on December 2nd. I think as I've mentioned earlier on, we sort of update this as we get known information about what the costs will be for next year. And we did get notification from the city of Battleground about what the cost will be for the municipal court services for 2021. And they reflect a fairly significant increase in the filings that the court has received from La Center. And so this year, the estimated cost is in the $51,000 range because not only did your filings go up, but your share of the total filings went up over a 3-year average. And so that number is going to be 84,100 in 2021. We had budgeted in the preliminary budget 54,000. And so we'll be modifying that budget to increase it by 30,100 in the budget that is presented to you on December 2nd. So the filings went up. 237 were the filings in 2018, and there were 432 in 2019, and that was the 2019 is part of the 3-year average, newly added to the 3-year average where they allocate those costs. So wanted to bring that to your attention. So that'll take the projected deficit from 324,000 to 354,176. And I will say we're doing a little bit of work looking at your 2020 budget. There will also be a budget amendment on your agenda at your December 2nd meeting for 2020. You can see we're, in this estimate, we're just over the budgeted amount. We'd like to provide you with some cushion on that to meet the state requirements that all the expenses have appropriations. And so that'll be part of your agenda on December 2nd as well. But we're still fairly confident in with a range margin of error on this, the deficit, the proposed deficit for 2020. Continuing on with the information on the proposed budget, the preliminary budget. This is just the forecast showing you with the updates for the next 3 years. So 21, 22, 23, fairly consistent, small deficits. Actually in 2024, again, going back to the assumptions that we used about development at the junction, actually get to a positive surplus, small surplus in 2024. And then with a subsequent slowdown in development in the last 2 years, the deficits return. And if you follow those assumptions, you're at the end of the period, your reserve balances are just under 2.4 million, representing just under 50% of total expenses. Capital projects, don't necessarily need to go through all of these. We are effectively reappropriating the full amount of the Breezy Creek. I think you're having an update on that today. I know that there's been 600,000 or so of expenses through the end of October. So that project is moving forward fairly quickly, 610,000. And I think we showed you this last time, but your capital reserves are very strong and the revenues are coming in very well. Got over $7 million of reserves and proposed with all the expenses, roughly 2.5 million, 2.6 million of city expenses. So. And then lastly, just have the information that will be part of the budget that you see on December 2nd, really a full presentation showing you the beginning reserve balances up top. So starting with 15.1 million and on the capital project side, between the capital projects and impact fees, there's that 7 million that I'd mentioned before. Those are the revenues, and they're the expenses by primary object, we call these, primary category. And the ending reserve balance, all told, would be just over 14 million per the projections in the budget. Any questions on the preliminary budget before I get into next steps? So you do have a public hearing on revenue sources tonight. Again, we're combining that with the public hearing on the ordinance to increase the property tax. Actually, this is one slide I forgot to update. Because of the conversations we had with the assessor, we no longer have to ask you to access your banked capacity. It's sort of a complicated explanation, but it has to do with the large amount of administrative adjustment that was applied this year, and essentially that eclipses your bank capacity, and you're allowed your 1% increase only. Sorry about that, but that was one of the changes that we made in your ordinance. So the ordinance in front of you tonight just has a 1% increase on your 2020 property tax levy of $506,660. So it's asking for a $5,066 increase. And then the solid waste and recycling utility tax would be on your agenda for December 2nd. Public hearing and potential ordinance for adoption of your 2021 budget also on December 2nd. We have published the notice this week and next week for that public hearing. The preliminary budget was posted on November 2nd. We'll get the proposed budget with that one change posted tomorrow. And then in addition to the ordinance for the 2021 budget not shown on this slide, we'll have a ordinance amending your 2020 budget, again, providing for a little bit of cushion on the general fund expenditure side primarily. So with that, happy to answer any questions that you might have, either on the property tax levy increase, the proposed ordinance, or the property tax increase that's on your agenda tonight, or the solid waste and recycling utility tax, or the preliminary budget.
Well, not hearing any questions, I just want to thank you for all your hard work and great presentation yet again this evening and through the entire process with preparing the 2021 budget. Stay silent here if the council does have any questions for you or comments or any discussion amongst themselves.
Just thank you, Paul, for getting all of the updated information on there so quickly and helping us through the entire process. Your insight always gives us a much, much clearer perspective on how best to move forward.
Happy to help. Sorry about the last minute changes, but I've been working with the state's property tax system for 20 years, and it always seems to throw me a little bit of a curveball. And this year, especially, some of the jurisdictions had to deal with the implicit price deflator being lower than 1%. I don't think I mentioned that, but the implicit price deflator was 0.602, which is below 1%. So a number of jurisdictions, the jurisdictions over 10,000 population, have to pass a substantial need resolution in addition to the regular increase. Since your population is under 10,000, you are relieved of that requirement. So, but I very much enjoyed working with you. I hope it's been helpful. Really appreciate the work of the Budget Advisory Committee. It's a great sounding board to be able to sort of work with and run some of the proposed increases, proposed adjustments, get into some of the questions in a little bit more detail, some of the information in a little bit more detail. And I've really appreciated their insights, their input. And like I said, enjoyed working with the council as well.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's obvious a lot of work has gone into this, and I appreciate it.
Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and close this evening's work session. It's right now about 6 minutes after 6. Clerk, would it be better just to leave the meeting open, or should we close out of this and rejoin the meeting, or start it up again at 6:30, or?
Yeah, if everybody would like to leave, they can. What I'll do is I'll keep the meeting open but not recording. And then that way, if anybody wants to drop off, they'll be able to come back in at any time before 6:30.
Okay, so just leave the meeting and not back out of it. Okay.
Sounds good. I need to take a little break anyway, so I'll see you at 6:30.
Perfect. Thank you again, Paul.
You're welcome.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Clerk. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I see it's 6:30 and all the council members are online. So today is Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. I'd like to call this evening's regularly scheduled city council meeting to order. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I have a roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Boff,
Here.
Councilmember Williams,
Present.
Councilmember Strobin.
Here.
Councilmember Cerveny,
Here.
Mayor Thornton.
Present. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there are no requests for any items to be removed, may I have a motion to approve it, the consent agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Thank you. Next are presentations and proclamations. I do have a proclamation that I will be reading this evening. It's proclamation declaring Native American Heritage Month, November 2020. Whereas during National Native American Heritage Month, we celebrate the rich tapestry of Indigenous peoples and honor their sacrifices, which we recognize and inextricably woven into the history of their country. And whereas Native Americans are descendants of the original Indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States, and whereas Native Americans have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, and perseverance that need to be shared with future generations. And whereas Native Americans have enriched our heritage and continue to add to all aspects of our society through their generosity of culture and their continued practice of teaching, economic, environmental, and cultural sustainability. And whereas our country is blessed to be by the character and strength exemplified by the Native Americans who have answered the call of service in our armed forces in greater numbers per capita than any other group in the United States. We honor our Native American veterans and those who serve in active duty for their bravery and sacrifice. And whereas the City of La Center renews its commitment to protecting the tribal sovereignty and self-determination of Native American peoples. And whereas the City of La Center is committed to engaging in dialogues led by tribal communities around the opportunities and work in which they are currently engaged in areas of self-determination, sovereignty, and cultural preservation in order to create an active government-to-government collaboration. And whereas during the month of November, we honor our Native American peoples in their ancestral homes and recognize their continued contributions in strengthening the diversity of our society. Now, therefore, I, Greg Thornton, Mayor of La Center, do hereby proclaim November 2020 as Native American Heritage Month and encourage all citizens to join in this observance. Could I get a motion from the council?
Mayor, I move we accept this, approve this proclamation of Native American Heritage Month for November of 2020.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the adoption of the proclamation of Native American Heritage Month, November 2020. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, council. So next on the agenda, we do have a interlocal agreement that Administrative Services Manager will be presenting to the council this evening.
Good evening, council. So you have before you, if she can scroll down, an interlocal agreement between the City of Battleground and the City of La Center for the use of their court, their judges, court clerk, accounting, clerking of jury and non-jury trials, work crew, the arrangement of public defender services, interpreters, investigators, prosecution, and transporting defenders to and from jail. The annual fee will be $84,000. And as Paul mentioned in the work session, that is calculated on a rolling 3-year period. According to Danny, it looks like the 2020 percentage has gone up by 24% over 2019 usage. And so according to Chief Denny, the interlocal has been in place for 10 years. We renew it on an annual basis, and we're just making sure that all interlocals go before the council for your approval. So Chief Denny is on here if you guys have any questions about the services that they offer. Anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay.
Questions or comments?
No.
Okay. Could I get a motion to approve the interlocal agreement for provisions of municipal prosecution and work crews services with Battleground?
Mayor,
So moved.
I move we approve the interlocal agreement for provision of municipal court, prosecution, and work crew services with the City of Battleground.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the interlocal agreement for provisions of municipal court, prosecution, and work crew services with the City of Battleground. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Boff,
Aye.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Councilmember Strobin,
Yes.
Councilmember Cerveny.
Yes.
The The agreement is approved unanimously by the council. Thank you, council. Thank you very much, Maria. Next on the agenda is citizen public comment. Citizen public comments will be read by the city clerk this evening, observing the 3-minute rule. So with that, if you could please read the citizen public comments.
Okay. The first one is from Lou Vajtai. Hello, we live at 532 East Stone Creek Drive near the 5th Avenue intersection, and the recent construction work to the road is already showing evidence of defects. The water is significantly seeping up through the asphalt in the middle of the road. This is a very similar issue that contributed to the need to have this project take place to begin with. Can you please forward this email to the mayor and/or council members so they are aware of this occurring and needs to be remedied ASAP? And then the next one comes from Nelda Perryman. Is the mayor and the council aware that a person/persons stole $175 worth of yellow and blue ribbons off the Listener Bridge within 24 hours of their being put up? I was wondering if the mayor or anyone on the council had any information that would help in apprehending this thief. We, the Police Advisory Coalition, are a nonprofit organization and depend upon donations to help cover the cost of these ribbons. We are trying to understand who would be against showing support for our military men and women and these ribbons. We are trying to understand who would be against showing support, sorry about that, so our appreciation for our listener police department. This is yet another example of how our city has been divided. And Nelda Perryman had one other comment. Has the $20,000 assessment of the Listener Police Department been conducted? If so, when will the results be made public? If not, when do you expect them to be completed? This next one comes from Roger Price. I was just informed about the ribbons on the bridge. What is up with the city council again? Why does the council go against the majority of Listener residents? There is nothing wrong with ribbons to display our support for our military and law enforcement. This is not Portland, it's Listener, Washington. The only thing you are accomplishing is when it comes due for elections, there will be changes made. The council and mayor must have bigger and better things to do than mess around talking about bridge ribbons. Does the budget and operations of the city ring any bells? Did your consultants give you advice again? Yes. Our city has grown in the 30+ years I've lived in La Center, but you would think that the feelings of residents make some sort of effect on our city council and mayor. Emerging and suggest to the council and mayor to put the ribbons back up on the bridge without having to have someone apply for a permit and waste the time in a council meeting. There is nothing wrong in showing our support. Why doesn't the council show some backbone and get on with doing something right for a change? Would someone on the council and/or mayor address this letter publicly and respond back to me in their decisions and explanations? Maybe a letter in our sewer bill would be good since everyone, voters, receives it every month. My next one comes from Heather Jolma. My comment that the street widening project would include a bike lane near the school for safety for kiddos. Thanks. The next one comes from Sally Alkazin. It is dismaying to me to see empty buildings in our city. The former Buc-ee's Pizza, 2 non-operating card rooms that were closed before the COVID crisis are examples. When we are struggling as a city to find operating revenue, is someone working with the owners of these buildings to try and bring in new businesses? The only new buildings we currently have under construction is the Heritage Center and a bed and breakfast. I have heard, can't be verified however, that the Heritage Center is already booked completely. Clearly there is a demand for space for new businesses. However, no one seems to be working on getting those businesses here. As I drive our south and north neighbors, Ridgefield and Woodland, it is clear that they are getting all kinds of new business and attached revenue. Ridgefield has a beautiful new shopping center with not only a supermarket, but many other businesses. Woodland has a new credit union, coffee shop, and other businesses by the Walmart area, a new same-day health clinic downtown, and the B Young RV establishment. And what has La Center added? Nothing I can think of. Where is our so-called community development person? The entire debacle for the former TDS building is an embarrassment. Why has that been sitting empty for so long? And at what cost? Clearly, no one in city government is keeping an eye out for the long-term health of our town. I fear for our future, as just adding more homes is not a sustainable option. We need businesses to provide services for those living in the homes and creating tax revenue for our city. This citizen would like the city council and the consultants hired to bring in new business and associated tax revenue. And I know many other citizens agree with me. Thank you for your time. The next one comes from Sean Wright. I write this on November 15th, World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. Traffic collisions are the #1 cause of death for children. The following list is a very small fraction of those who died in the United States bicycling this year. I would like their names spoken such that they are remembered on this day. It is my hope that the death of these children will be to call action against further tragedy. Derek Betancourt, age 18. Eric Andreas, age 18. Samuel Ozer, age 17. Gavin Alksbury, age 17. Terry Martin, age 16. Christopher Salas, age 16. Anthony Janish, age 16. Jonathan Feltengoff, age 16. Evan Mello, age 15. Jackson Sturm, age 15. Jaden Arias, age 15. Dylan Schuster, age 14. Tyrese Manigo, age 14. Jaden Religa, age 14. Donovan Oxendine, age 14. Ethan Gordon, age 14. Aiden Caldwell, age 13. Liam Ronan, age 13. Lucas Mason, age 13. Trevor Woolenweaver, age 13. Isaac Martinez, age 13. Emma Phillips, age 12. Anthony Cruz, age 12. Paul Lafargue, age 11. Irie Suarez, age 10. Victor Peterson, age 10. Kane Adkins, age 10. Kinsley Millard, age 9. I'd also like the name of Damien Van de Castile to be read, a 10-year-old who was struck and killed while biking to school in Vancouver last year. It truly hurts when these tragedies happen so close to home. Lastly, I'd like the name April Brewer read, a young woman who was struck and killed bicycling in our city of La Center. It would be wonderful if we could honor April by providing signage near the incident. Once the planned shared use trail on South Pacific is built, it would be wonderfully placed near there, such as the citizens of La Center can see the good work the city has done in response, representing our work to provide safe paths for our most vulnerable population and honoring her memory. Every day, 100 Americans are killed on our streets and millions more are injured each year. We must learn from these deaths and dedicate ourselves to make smart development decisions going forward. I beg the council to review the materials I am submitting into the record at this council meeting and those I have submitted prior. In today's council meeting, engineering states that the signal and roundabout both had support. Only one comment was submitted in support of the signal, while over 90% of our community that has commented agrees with my suggested changes to the 4th Street project. And so do many traffic engineers I have spoken to. Not only are these changes the best moral, but also the best fiscal decisions long-term. Please represent the best interests of our community and children along with this school zone. Please make sure we include these much-needed safety improvements for our kids in the plans. There won't be another chance once built. I've included several visuals in a PDF that I've added to the meeting minutes. I'd be incredibly appreciative if the council would review them. That's the last one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the mayor's report. Just a few items to go over with the city council this evening. First, just a reminder for our December meeting schedule. The next city council meeting will be on Wednesday, December 2nd. We'll, of course, begin at 6:30. And then the meeting after that will be Wednesday, December 16th, again, beginning at 6:30. At the last council meeting, I mentioned that the city attorney will be doing a training session with the Planning Commission Tuesday, December 8th, beginning at 5:30. And it's training for the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act. And at that time, I asked the council if they would be willing to meet with the Planning Commission and have a joint meeting. And I just want to ask the council again to confirm that they will be available at 5:30 on December 8th. So I'll just go through the council members individually. Councilmember Boff, are you available that evening?
Yes, I'll be there.
Councilmember Cerveny?
Yes.
Councilmember Strobin?
That was December 8th, right, Mayor?
Correct, December 8th, beginning at 5:30 at work session.
Yep, not a problem. I'll be there.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Williams?
That looks good for me too, sir. So it'll be a
Great.
work session for council?
Yeah, joint work session with the Planning Commission, and I appreciate everybody's committing to having that meeting. And just note that the city has received 4 applications for the vacant city council position. I believe the city has already forwarded those applications to the city council members. That application process did close today. So I'm grateful that we received the 4 applicants, and we'll be looking forward to moving forward with the process. I want to give a shout out to our city public works crew driving in this evening. I saw all the Christmas decorations lit up. They continue to working on that, but it's a great start, and the city's really starting to look great, and I appreciate all their hard work on getting that done. And then finally, I just want to mention that, of course, November 26th is Thanksgiving. The city offices will be closed on November 26th and 27th. And I just want to wish all the city council, city staff, and the citizens of the center and a happy Thanksgiving, and hope everyone has a very safe and enjoyable Thanksgiving. That's all I have this evening. Next on the agenda would be the attorney's report. City attorney, if you have a report for the council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do not have a report this evening, but would like to extend a happy Thanksgiving wish to everyone attending the meeting.
Very good, thank you. Any questions for the city attorney this evening, council? Okay, next on the agenda are council comments. Councilmember Boff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As with you and Mr. Potter, I would like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving. That's all I have tonight.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Williams.
There we go. I'll have to tag on and wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Also, please stay safe. You know, I've started doing instant messenger video calls with my kids because they're staying in just like we are here. So minimize your contacts, be safe. We'll get through this. It's encouraging what I saw in the news tonight about the new COVID vaccinations. It looks like they'll be available in at the end of the first quarter to the general public. So that's encouraging. But anyway, stay safe and have a great Thanksgiving. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that's going to be a common theme tonight. I want to wish everybody a safe and happy Thanksgiving. And I too would also like to thank the city employees for putting up the Christmas decorations. It looks great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Cerveny.
I would just follow suit and extend my appreciation and gratitude to staff and council and the community. We have a wonderful city that we all belong to, and I think we all work very hard for building it stronger and taking it where we all vision it to be in the future. But have a very, very safe holiday. Enjoy your family members. I would encourage you to stay home and stay well. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda are staff reports. The first report we'll have this evening will be from the Administrative Services Manager, Leah Swinger.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are continuing to interview for the senior accountant position after our finalists decided to remain with their current employer. We did receive some new candidates, and we just wrapped up the second round of interviews last week, and we do hope to make an offer by the end of the week. We're just making sure that we find somebody who is the right fit, who has good education and good skills, and is looking forward to working in a very busy office. So as you can see there, the sales tax disbursement was $67,331 for October, which is more than twice what it was in October of last year, which was $32,377. So we just continue to see that upward trend as we have for the past several months. And then you'll see there our last gambling tax revenue for 2020. The total for the year was $387,744, which is $890,000 less than last year. And then one thing I did want to add on, I know at last meeting there was discussion about whether the city council candidates would come in person, but with the governor's new orders restricting in-person contact, the council interviews will not be done in person. We will have to do that virtually. Are there any questions tonight?
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Not hearing any questions. We'll move on. Thank you, Maria. Next on the agenda this evening is we do have a presentation from PBS. Mr. Greg Jellison is here, and he will be going through it's a PowerPoint presentation, slide presentation on the Breezy Creek project. Appreciate you being here this evening, Mr. Jellison, and we're anxious to see your presentation.
You bet. So I'll start sharing my screen here. And can you see that?
Looks
Yes.
good.
Okay. So I will go ahead and get started. So hello, Mayor Ford and City Council. Thanks so much for inviting me to present tonight. My name is Greg Jellison, and I'm the Principal Civil Engineer for PBS Engineering and Environmental. And also I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Breezy Creek 4th Street project here. So also with me here today, or tonight, to present on different types of bicycle facilities is Judith Perez. Judith is the Senior Transportation Planner with me at PBS. Prior to joining PBS, Judith was with WashDOT as the Multimodal Development Manager in the Southwest Region Office, and was also the Active Transportation Coordinator for the 7 counties covered by the Southwest Region of WashDOT. And in her career, Judith has been involved with active transportation in a professional capacity for 3 different state DOTs, 1 MPO, which shows the Cowlitz-Cog, and for the city of Boulder, Colorado, as well as in a volunteer capacity since 1993. So just wanted to make sure and introduce Judith. She'll be presenting later in the slideshow here. To start with here this evening, we're going to review some of the efforts that have been completed to date and some of the background for the project. We've presented on some of this before, but I wanted to make sure and give everybody a refresher on that. So through the approval of the Department of Commerce grant, 2 primary goals were identified. So those were to remove the existing fish passage barrier under 4th Street and to improve all modes of transportation using this corridor to provide for a complete streets cross section. In working with city staff, the additional goals of maintaining 2-way traffic during construction and the inclusion of community outreach efforts were identified. Now, the project is currently funded through the design phase, and additional funds for construction are being sought by the city staff. The start of construction is currently targeting the spring of 2022, but is dependent on construction funding being secured. So the PBS team began our reconnaissance and research of the existing conditions for the project corridor in March of 2020. So from March of 2020 to August of 2020, information was collected and incorporated into the development of alternatives for specific aspects of the project, namely the structure that would replace the existing culvert crossing under 4th Street, and of course the potential improvements to the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection. The alternatives analysis phase concluded in August with the recommendation from the PBS team to select the bridge alternative to replace the existing culvert and the signal alternative to improve traffic control and safety at the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection. Those recommendations were presented to the City Council during the August 12th, 2020 meeting at City Council, and City staff directed PBS to then continue with further development of these selected alternatives for the project. The PBS team then completed our 30% design development based on those recommendations in October of 2020. So as part of the 30% design, PBS created a virtual open house video to share information about the project with the public and receive comments and questions about the project. The comments received to date will be discussed a little bit later in this presentation, but going forward, the project has several additional design milestones where more details will be developed for the project and the design will be refined in order to prepare plans, specifications, and a cost estimate for the planned work. The goal is to complete the design development by July of 2021 and then wait to advertise the project to prospective contractors until construction funding has been secured. The dates shown here align with an anticipated start of construction for the spring of 2022, and then construction is anticipated to take approximately 18 months once underway. As mentioned previously, the alternatives analysis report completed in August looked at different options for specific components of the project. A list of 17 criteria was developed to be used to score and rank the proposed alternatives with the goal of allowing an equitable comparison of the alternatives, regardless of the cost to construct any given alternative. If you've reviewed the report, you might have noticed that safety specifically is not a listed criterion. This is because as licensed design professionals, we would never consider proposing an alternative or developing a design that is unsafe. We take our responsibility to the public and our profession very seriously and have decades of experience developing safe and effective solutions for the communities that we live and work in. All of the developed alternatives were designed to be safe and effective solutions to address any deficiencies or non-code compliant aspects that were identified during our team's investigations. For the 6-year period spanning from January 2014 through December 2019, a total of 8 collisions were reported within the project limits. The data obtained from the Washington Department of Transportation, or WSDOT, indicates there were no significant collision patterns or high collision frequencies at the studied intersections. Of the 8 total collisions in the 6-year period, 1 was reported to involve a pedestrian and 1 was reported to involve a bicycle. The detailed WSDOT data showed no severe injuries resulting from the collisions. The results of the scoring and ranking for the alternatives are presented on the table shown. And as you can see, there were 3 alternatives for the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection and 2 for the culvert replacement structure. The signal alternative had the highest score for the intersection alternatives with an anticipated cost of construction of approximately $650,000. The bridge alternative had the highest score for the culvert replacement alternatives with an anticipated cost of construction of approximately $5.64 million. The no-build intersection alternative would improve sight distance at the existing intersection. But both the signal and roundabout alternatives met or exceeded all code requirements for facilities of this type, so that the proposed solutions would be safe for all types of users. The culvert replacement alternatives both provide for the addition of bicycle and pedestrian facilities on both sides of the roadway, as well as allowing for dedicated space to allow turning movements. So as many of you may have experienced, with no dedicated left turn lane, vehicles are currently forced to stop in the active travel lane and wait, thereby blocking through traffic. By adding a dedicated turn lane, these delays will be eliminated and provide a safe refuge for turning vehicles and reduce delays to through traffic. Again, the cost for each alternative was only developed after the developed alternatives were scored and their rankings determined. And there's going to be further discussion of the signal and roundabout alternatives a little bit later in this presentation as well. So after the alternatives analysis report was submitted, the PBS team began more detailed development of the selected alternatives and the other portions of the project corridor. So the main work products were a strip map of the proposed improvements in the project corridor, an estimate of the anticipated construction costs for the project, and a rendered video showing what the corridor would look like once construction was complete. The rendered video was included as part of the virtual open house video, which was posted to the city's website. The west end of the project is near the intersection of 4th Street and Cedar Avenue in downtown La Center. In order to connect back to the existing street network beyond the limits of the project, the cross-section at this end of the project provides for 2 vehicle lanes, as well as a bike lane and sidewalk on each side of the roadway. So heading east, the cross-section is expanded to include a center turn lane to allow vehicles waiting to turn a safe place to wait while it's still allowing through traffic to continue uninterrupted. West of Breezy Creek, the intersection of Stone Creek Drive with 4th Street is also updated to connect with the improved 4th Street corridor. East of Breezy Creek, both the west and east driveways, both the west and east driveways for the La Center School campus are updated to connect with the improved 4th Street corridor. 2 private property driveways that connect to the 4th Street corridor are also updated. Paving and major construction activity stopped short of the existing Highland Road and 4th Street intersection, since this area was reconstructed as part of a previous project. At the intersection, 3 of the 4 corners will have curb ramps updated to meet current American with Disabilities Act or ADA requirements. And the intersection will have traffic signal poles and mast arms installed on all 4 corners. Street lighting will be added along the full project corridor, including lighting upgrades as part of the signal installation at the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection. So one thing I want to make sure is very clear about our design here is that it is designed with the safety of all users in mind. As part of roadway design, we are required to meet what is called clear zone requirements, and these are to provide clearance for vehicles from roadside hazards. When a street has a speed limit less than 35 miles per hour, the clear zone requirement is 10 feet from the edge of the travel lane. Now that is a very important distinction when designing an urban corridor with bike lanes. With our current design, we exceed that requirement by providing a 6-foot bike lane plus another 6 feet of sidewalk that provides 12 feet of clear zone. The bike lane also provides separation between the vehicular travel lane and the sidewalk for additional pedestrian safety. Now, it's important to note that if the vehicular travel lane was immediately adjacent to the curb, we would not be able to meet the clear zone requirements in this situation, and there would be no separation from the pedestrian facilities and not even any shy distance between the travel lane and the curb. So moving on to a discussion on community engagement. So the PBS team includes public involvement efforts to support the city in their community engagement for the project during the design phase. This community engagement effort has taken a multi-pronged approach, including the various methods for outreach portals shown on this slide. So PBS team members have also been asked to periodically provide project updates during city council meetings. I presented the first update occurred during the August 12th, 2020 meeting. And of course, this meeting being held tonight is our second scheduled update. As part of our design development and community engagement efforts on this project, our PBS team also prepared a virtual open house video. I mentioned that previously. It's posted to the city's website. So the website included a comment and questions portal to allow community members and interested parties to provide their feedback to the project team. As of yesterday, there had been 123 views of the video, 34 comments provided by 15 different individuals. The comment period for the virtual open house video is scheduled to conclude this Friday on November 20th. Of the comments received to date, they mainly center around 2 common themes, one being the selection of a signal or roundabout alternative for the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection, and the second common theme relates to bicycle facilities through the project corridor. So I'd like to spend some time talking about each of these. So the roundabout alternative shown on the slide is what was prepared as part of the alternatives analysis report and is designed to accommodate vehicles, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic in a safe and effective manner through the intersection. The design was developed by licensed design professionals with extensive experience in developing these types of infrastructure improvements throughout the Pacific Northwest. One aspect included in the design shown is a connection for each of the bike lane facilities coming into and leaving the intersection to a 10-foot wide multi-use path surrounding the intersection. This allows cyclists that are not comfortable riding with traffic within the roundabout to navigate around the intersection without having to ride through the roundabout. The design has been shifted south and west from the current center lines of the intersection to reduce impacts to private properties on the northeast and southeast corners of the intersection. A A critical objective of the placement was also to avoid direct impacts to the existing stormwater facility owned by the city on the northwest corner of the intersection. If that existing stormwater facility were impacted, it would need to be brought up to current detention and treatment standards and would add additional costs to the project. But even with shifting of the planned improvements, there are still real impacts to private and public lands surrounding the intersection. The size of the roundabout was determined using the turning movements of both school buses and a WB67 vehicle, which is a tractor trailer vehicle. This type of analysis is critical to ensure that delivery, construction, and more conventional vehicles like school buses can safely navigate the roundabout without causing damage to the curbs and other built elements surrounding the intersection or to the vehicles themselves. School buses obviously are a very important vehicle at this intersection. This type of turn movement analysis often results in additional space needs well beyond what you might think is necessary just looking at layout on the page. There are smaller footprint roundabouts, such as the existing roundabout in downtown the center. These are often referred to as compact roundabouts. When the size of the center island and aprons surrounding the center island are reduced, not all type of vehicles will be able to navigate the intersection safely and effectively. Just so you know, PBS is well known for its expertise in roundabout design in the region, and we believe that a roundabout is certainly a viable alternative for this intersection. And just a personal note, I personally have 32 years of experience in transportation engineering, and just locally here have been involved in the design of 20 roundabouts just in Clark County over the last 6 years. I personally am a very strong proponent for roundabouts as intersection improvements when it is the right solution at that intersection. However, every project is different, and one of the things that we are required to do as licensed design professionals is to evaluate a number of options and make objective recommendations to our clients for their projects. This is the same professional approach that has been applied for your project, which for this set of circumstances led PBS to recommend a traffic signal for this intersection. So moving on to the signalized option. So the signal alternative looks to address the existing deficiencies for the pedestrian ramps and bring them up to current ADA code requirements. And we've mentioned this before, but a signal pole and mast arm would be installed at each of the 4 corners with a signal controller cabinet located at one corner of the intersection. The signal timing and duration for each of the phases of the signal system can be adjusted over time to optimize traffic flows. It can even be set to help during the traffic peaks centered around the start and end of the school day to help children crossing the intersection and buses looking to exit from Ivy Avenue. This is far safer than the current intersection, which is controlled by a 2-way stop sign configuration. The level of service is a measure of vehicular traffic flow, reflecting indicators such as speed, travel time, freedom to maneuver, traffic interruptions, comfort, and convenience. The level of service for this signal alternative for the 20-year planning horizon is B, which exceeds the adopted city standards. Although the level of service for the roundabout is A for the same planning window, both are anticipated to be able to move vehicle traffic effectively and safely through the intersection. Bicycle users and pedestrians would not need to navigate around the intersection, but would be able to continue through the intersection more directly. The operating and maintenance costs for a signalized intersection are typically more than for a roundabout. There's a cost for the electricity to operate the system and a cost to adequately maintain the equipment over time. Many planning guidelines use a range of costs approximately $5,000 to $10,000 per year to look at the total cost of an alternative, including operation and maintenance costs during the service life of the facility. So even if the higher value of $10,000 per year is used, the anticipated cost savings for operation and maintenance would be approximately $200,000. The anticipated construction cost increase to construct a roundabout rather than a signal at this intersection is $2.3 million. This cost difference obviously cannot be made up by just the savings of maintenance cost comparison between a signal and roundabout. So for this low speed corridor, the signal provides safe crossing routes for pedestrians and bicyclists, particularly school children, by requiring traffic to completely stop, offering visibility, and providing an allotted amount of time for pedestrian and bicycle passage through the intersection. The signal provides safety and level of service improvements with a significantly lower cost, reduced property impacts, and less right-of-way acquisition. So at this time, I'm going to hand over the presentation to Judith Perez to discuss various types of bicycle facilities that can be implemented along the corridors and when it is appropriate to consider these various options. Take it away, Judith.
Hello, can you hear me? Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. The word cloud on your slide depicts the range of terms used in the comments received to date about the desired bicycle facility on East 4th Street. Bicycle facilities come in multiple forms, including on-street and off-streets. In addition, bicycle facilities nomenclature is non-standardized. A protected cycle track, a buffer bike lane, or a protected bike lane could all be designed with the same components and therefore look the same. Whether we call the proposed bicycle facility cycle track or bike lane, the main takeaway from the community feedback is that the proposed bicycle facility, to feel comfortable and safe, it must be buffer. So let's talk about what buffer means. Separation types range from simple painted buffers and flexible delineators to more substantial separation measures, including raised curves, raised islands, bollards, and planters. These options range in feasibility due to roadway characteristics, available space, cost, and ability to maintain. As an example, conventional street sweeping equipment is too wide to access the designated space for this bicycle facility. At PBS, staff relies on published design standards and guidelines for recognized organizations for the development of our work products. For bicycle facilities, one of the most complete, current, and comprehensive guidelines available is the Urban Bikeway Design Guide, published by the National Association of City Transportation Officials. NACTO's goal is to provide state-of-the-practice solutions that can help create complete streets that are safe and enjoyable for cyclists of all abilities. A link to this national recognized guideline is provided at the bottom of this slide. The Urban Bikeway Design Guide is used by active transportation planners and engineers nationwide to guide in the design of bicycle facilities. The illustrations and definitions used in this presentation were derived from the guide. The next 6 slides will allow us to explore the different bicycle facilities mentioned during the project outreach process. Please note that the words on these slides are used interchangeably to define the desired bicycle facility, one that is protected or buffered from motor vehicles. You might be wondering what exactly is a two-way cycle track. For NACTO definition, a two-way cycle track is a physical separated bicycle facility that allows bicycle movement in both directions on one side of the road. Two-way cycle tracks are also known as protected bike lanes, separated bikeways, and on-street bike paths. Two-way cycle tracks work best on one-way streets to minimize the potential conflict with motor vehicles. In addition, two-way cycle tracks require additional considerations like driveway and side street crossings to avoid potential conflict between different types of users. One-way protected cycle tracks or bike lanes are bikeways that are at street level and use a variety of methods for physical protection from passing traffic. One-way protected cycle tracks usually are combined with a parking lane or other barrier between the cycle track and the motor vehicle lane. Protected cycle tracks can be found along streets with multiple travel lanes, high traffic volumes, high speed traffic, high parking turnover, and with high bicycle volumes. By looking at the current slide, you might be wondering if there's a difference between this bicycle facility and the previous one. Buffer bike lanes are conventional bicycle lanes paired with a designated buffer space separating the bicycle lane from the adjacent motor vehicle travel lane or parking lane. The bicycle facilities are usually found on streets with multiple travel lanes, high travel speed, high travel volumes, and/or high amounts of truck traffic. Bike lanes are also known as conventional bike lanes. These facilities are an exclusive space for bicyclists with pavement markings and signage. The bike lane is located adjacent to motor vehicle travel lanes and flows in the same direction as the motor vehicle traffic. Bike lanes are typically on the right side of the street between the adjacent travel lane and curb, road edge, or parking lane. Bike lanes enable bicycles to ride at their preferred speed without interference from prevailing traffic conditions. Lastly, bicycle boulevards are streets with low motorized traffic volumes and speeds, designated and designed to give bicycles travel priority. Bicycle boulevards use signs, pavement markings, and speed and volume management measures to discourage through trips by motor vehicles and create safe, convenient bicycle crossing at busy arterial streets. As mentioned previously in the presentation, the alternatives analysis phase considered contextual factors such as vehicular speed and volumes and operational uses. This analysis allowed planners and engineers to determine a bicycle facility that met the identified purpose and need for the project. During the next couple of slides, Greg will walk you through a few proposed modifications we have to offer for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
So thanks, Judith. I had to get unmuted and turn my camera back on here. Sorry about that. So, so some next steps here. So after receiving and reviewing the community comments from the virtual open house video, PBS and city staff have spent many hours talking about potential modifications to the corridor design to enhance allocation of space for bicycle facilities and the intersection configuration for Highland Road and 4th Street. So just so you understand, the cross sections that we used as part of the 30% design development were based upon the adopted City of La Center standards for the roadway classification assigned to the segment of 4th Street. And the cross-section alternatives or the lane configurations for that were not part of the alternatives analysis process. So, but although the updated cross-section shown on the next few slides deviate from the adopted City of La Center standards slightly for this roadway, the city staff have indicated that they would work with PBS to develop the necessary documentation for the project to go ahead and deviate from that city standard. To me, this is confirmation that city staff and the PBS team are open to receiving and acting on community feedback for this project and evaluating requested revisions with applicable design codes and safety in mind. Of course, not all ideas can be implemented as they have been presented during recent public meetings, as they do not meet design code requirements that accommodate all modes of transportation and all levels of users. So next steps here. So PBS will continue to work with city staff to finalize the design for the project corridor. Additional details will be developed and added to the design. Adjustments to the distribution of available width established for the project corridor has already taken place, and then community engagement efforts will continue throughout the design phase. The design phase of the project is supported, as mentioned previously, by a Department of Commerce grant, and the design is fully funded. The City of La Center has also been awarded an additional Regional Transportation Council grant for $1,045,000, which is earmarked specifically for construction. Those funds will not be available for use until at least 2022 at the earliest, and additional funds are currently being pursued to fully fund construction for the project. So construction can only be scheduled to begin once the developed project is fully funded. So if the project is expanded beyond its current footprint, the anticipated construction cost will increase and make the job of fully funding construction more difficult for city staff working diligently on this aspect of the project. So the adoption of the roundabout for the Highland Road and 4th Street intersection would add nearly $2.3 million over 17% to the current total project cost. So the proposed conceptual updated cross section shown here meets all WSDOT and modern design requirements for low speed corridors. And I just want to make sure you understand, this is a low speed corridor. With a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit and a 20-mile-per-hour school speed zone, 4th Street is most certainly a low speed corridor. The vehicle travel lanes have been reduced from 12 feet to 10.5 feet for the east-west lane and from 12 feet to 11 feet for the center turn lane. This reduction in width for vehicles has been redistributed for bicycle and pedestrian facilities on each side of the roadway. The updated cross-section provides separation of vehicle traffic from bicycle users through the use of a 2-foot wide painted buffer, which is in addition to the 5-foot bike lane. The cross-section also provides separation between vehicle and pedestrian users. And I'd like to note that the sidewalk is now 7 feet instead of 6 feet. So by not creating a hard barrier between the travel lanes and the bike facilities, the full width of the roadway can be maintained with existing city-owned street sweeping equipment. The updated cross-section also allows for vehicles to pull over to the right when necessary to allow emergency vehicles to pass safely. Pulling over to the right is specifically mandated by the revised Code of Washington. Without the ability to pull over during an emergency, there is no safe and effective way for first responders to proceed through the corridor without swerving around vehicles forced to stop in the active travel lane. This is particularly true on the 2-lane cross-section shown on the next slide. So the sidewalk widths, as I mentioned before, they've been increased from those shown in the 30% design to 7 feet. This will allow for more usable space for pedestrians and the accommodation of elements such as street lighting and roadway signage without needing to expand the total project footprint beyond the 60-foot width shown. So the updated 2-lane cross-section is similar to that of the 3-lane cross-section shown on the previous slide. The center turn lane has been eliminated, reducing the total width of the proposed improvements from back of sidewalk to 49 feet. The buffered bike lanes and sidewalks are maintained on both sides of the roadway. And then one last thing, both the modified cross sections, the 2-lane and 3-lane, provide even more clear zone. They provide now 14 feet and pedestrian buffer than the original cross section, along with having a buffered bike lane. So just in closing, we thank you. We appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to our presentation and for the privilege to continue to work with the City of La Center on this project. And let's back up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jellison. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Perez for her presentation. Any questions from City Council members for either Mr. Jellison or Ms. Perez?
Mayor,
Greg, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mayor, if I could ask Greg a question. Greg, could you put up the signalized intersection slide, please?
Oh, back up. Thought I had it at the end there, but it wasn't there.
Yeah,
so I'll go back.
I know. That's a roundabout one. That one, that's fine. On the northbound Ivy lane, will there be traffic sensors? Because that gets backed up with buses in the afternoon. And then also on the southbound Highland Road, that would get backed up with high school kids. I mean, I had kids that went to school there, and I know that backs up quite a bit.
Yeah, no, there would be sensors. Either likely it'd be video detection would be my expectation. Most of the newer signals are video detection versus in-road loops.
Okay. No, that's fine. It's just those would be two places that would get high demand. And
absolutely.
Ivy would have it in the morning as well. But if it could, stretch the signal timings, that would help. That's what I was just curious about. Thank you.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of the signal is that it can be customized for certain certain peak hours that are unique to the location, which this one certainly has some peak traffic right at school opening and school closing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Greg, this is Doug Boff. The audio was not the best when you were talking about recorded documented accidents. I think you said there were 8. How far back does that go when that data was?
I apologize for the audio. It's 15 or a 5-year period. They usually go in 5-year periods. So when we do analysis, so it was from 15. Let me go back to that note. It was up through 19, but it was a 5-year period, if I recall.
Okay.
If I can find that again. I'm pretty sure it was a 5-year period.
Okay. I mean, if you don't have it at your fingertips, perhaps you could just email that information to me or through the mayor. That would be great.
It's also in the traffic report and in the alternatives analysis report, but I have it here. I'll spot it here in a minute, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No. Okay.
Okay, again, I want to thank you, Mr. Jellison. Great presentation. Appreciate all your hard work.
Sorry, I was muted there, Mayor. I do have one quick question. In the conceptual updated 3-lane cross section, you're having a center lane of 11 feet and a 2-foot buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane. And the travel lanes are at 2.5 feet, or 10.5 feet, sorry. And you were saying that if you put curbs or some sort of a buffer in between the bike lane and the vehicle, it doesn't give them enough distance to pull off for emergency vehicles. But wouldn't that 11-foot center lane be something that'd be sufficient at that point for them?
You could, I mean, you could, the emergency vehicle could travel in the center turn lane. It could go around through the center lane in the 3-lane section, but the entire section is not a 3-lane section. It's a 2-lane section on part of it. And so if the curb is immediately adjacent to the lane, there's no place to pull over and get out of the way. And we are supposed to pull to the right.
Right. We're talking about a 2-foot buffer. Would it be a 2-foot curb or something in between there? Is that?
You could. If you were to do a protected, like in this section, and you had a 2-foot curb, yeah, there'd be a 6-inch high curb, that would be 2 foot wide. That would be adjacent there on either side. Plus that creates some additional, I think I mentioned some additional maintenance issues, drainage issues, a few other things. Not that they're impossible to overcome, they just cost more money.
Right, and 11 feet in the center. Average car 6.5 foot, average school bus is 7.5 foot, gives another 3 and the 11, so 14 foot of clearance for emergency vehicles. Okay, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and in the 2-lane section, you can see, you don't have that center turn lane obviously to go through. So being able to pull over to the right is an important aspect. Okay. Other questions?
Okay, thank you again. We'll continue with the agenda. We have one additional staff report yet this evening. It's community development report, and Mr. Jeff Swanson will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Just want to lovingly tell Mr. Jellison, go Ducks, with an important event coming up here, and wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving. I'm going to
go Beavs.
I'm going to move rapidly through a couple of project updates here and appreciate our clerk putting the map up. The first is project number 6, which is in the town center, historic town center, and it's Heritage Center Building B. The application for tenant improvements for Teresa's Little School on the first floor has been deemed incomplete as of the end of October, and we're currently awaiting for the applicant to resubmit for the tenant improvements for that use. The second update is project number 7, which is La Center Middle School. The lift station panel cover and concrete pad plans were submitted to the city on October 23rd. So that sewer pump station continues to move forward and be developed. Number 14, the project is Highland Terrace. The development agreement extending the review timeline was approved by council on October 28th, and a demolition permit was issued on October 22nd. Holly Park subdivision, that's number 15. The model home and sales center permit was approved on October 27th. Project number 16 is Kay's Place. And the update on that project is the sanitary sewer, storm drain, and water lines are now under construction. Nutter has begun construction of those improvements. Number 17 is Riverside Estates. Currently, 23 homes in phase 1 have been given occupancy. And the application for the phase 4 park plans were submitted on November 3rd. And that application has been given technically complete status and is currently under review. 3 additional updates, kind of heads up on some projects that'll be coming to council. First is the accessory dwelling unit code update. There was a city council workshop on October 14th. Planning Commission held a public hearing on November 10th, and we expect this to come before council either, well, it wouldn't be December 9th, we have December 9th down, but I think it'll either be the second meeting in December, which would be the 16th, or in January. Next project update is the downtown overlay code update. There was a planning commission hearing on November 10th, and this is currently scheduled to come to city council on December 16th. We have an application from Clark Public Utilities. This is a programmatic exemption for shorelines and critical areas. What it essentially is a series of type 1 types of approvals for work that they would do in terms of maintenance of the utilities in rights of way. And this application is under review by our planner. And we have, because it's a kind of an unusual type of a process in terms of it being a series of type 1 types of applications that are we would be giving a programmatic approval or exemption to. We need to figure out what the approval process for that looks like, and so we'll be consulting with legal counsel on that process. Those are all the updates that I have at this time. I will give you a heads up on the city's legislative agenda. I would expect that to come before council at the first meeting in December. Any questions?
Jeff, we have nothing at the junction. Any updates?
At the junction, we have minute management, which is project number 8. And at this time, they have an application in, but it was deemed technically incomplete. And so we're awaiting their submission.
Okay, thanks, Jeff.
Okay, any other questions, council, for Mr. Swanson this evening? Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it. We'll continue to move on. Next on the agenda are ordinances, resolutions, and public hearings. We do have a public hearing this evening, public hearing on revenue sources and the 2021 property tax levy. Mr. Paul Lewis will be presenting to council this evening. Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to bring the presentation up here. Got a presentation in advance of what is a combined public hearing. We're combining the public hearing on revenue sources along with the public hearing on ordinance 2020-04, which is your property tax levy for 2021. The public, and I apologize for the last minute changes to this presentation. It reflects updated information we received from the county assessor's office actually yesterday, with dialogue with them happening through this morning. So we did make an update to the presentation in the packet late this afternoon. Just a couple minor changes that I will highlight as we go through. So I mentioned it's a combined public hearing. There's a requirement for a public hearing on revenue sources in the state law. And the focus needs to be on the funding that supports the current expense or the general fund budget. Typically the focus is on taxes, but also cover other revenue sources. We also got a slide on the city's 2 utility funds as well. And then there's a public hearing on the property tax levy ordinance. We're proposing an increase in the property tax of 1%, and that's included in the ordinance that will follow this public hearing. And then just a note that the final budget adoption ordinance, which will also have a public hearing, is tentatively scheduled for your next council meeting on December 2nd. So here's a slide with the information on the revenue sources for the general fund. Again, your main operating fund that funds all of the core services that the city provides. The 2021 budget numbers are highlighted here, sort of the middle right, including the changes year over year. The 2021 budget compared to the 2020 estimate, the percentage change, and then the share that revenue source is of the total. The top half dozen sources here are the primary taxes, and then the other major revenue sources are combined down in the bottom. So in total, the tax revenue sources are for 2021 just under 2.4 million, the largest of which is the gambling tax on the card rooms, followed by the property tax, the sales tax, and the utility tax. And I'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail in a minute. Not to be ignored are the licenses and permits and charges for goods and services. These are the permit-related revenues, the development-related revenues, combined over $700,000, roughly 19% of the total. So also very significant revenue sources, but not necessarily the focus of this public hearing. Looking at the revenue sources in a pie chart, just to show you the share in a little different visual, the taxes represent roughly 63% of the total revenue. If you exclude the gambling taxes, so really focused on the local taxes, the property sales and utility taxes, they represent roughly 37% of the total revenue. And again, the total revenue being roughly $3.7 million. Property taxes, which is the focus of the ordinance in front of you later tonight, represent $544,000 in the budget and 14.5% of the total. When you look at the property tax specifically, this pie chart shows you the distribution of the 2020 levy rate in La Center by jurisdiction. A couple of key takeaways here. One is that the city of La Center's share of the property tax bill is just 10%. So it's a fairly small share of the overall $11.21 levy rate. The largest lion's share, over 65%, is related to schools, and the largest share of that is local school, both the capital and operating support, and all of those revenues, all that levy amount, those levy rates are from voter approved taxes. And if you recall, the state school levies reflect an implementation of the third or fourth year implementation of a plan that was developed back in 2017. It's got another year or two to run before it's over. It just divides the rates up and applies different rate factors over that time period to enhance funding for K-12 schools. And if you look at this pie chart, you don't see the Port of Ridgefield. There are some areas in the city that are in the Port of Ridgefield jurisdiction. If you're curious, that port's levy rate in 2020 was 17 cents, so fairly small overall. And I will mention that in addition, there are some areas inside the city that aren't included in the cemetery district, so they wouldn't have that cemetery district levy on their property tax bill. There are a number of state requirements that govern the increase in the property tax levy from year to year. There's specific ones regarding the 1% limit, the limit factor, and this applies to the highest lawful levy, and it is applied to the 1 year increase, so it's a maximum of 1%. For jurisdictions that are over 10,000, the maximum is the increase in the implicit price deflator. And for those jurisdictions, this year is somewhat unique, doesn't happen very often, but the implicit price deflator increase was 0.602%. But as a jurisdiction under 10,000, you're entitled to take the full 1% increase. And even those jurisdictions over 10,000 can have a finding of substantial need and increase up to the 1% limit. That increase is in addition to that increase, there's increases allowed for new construction, annexation, and utility infrastructure property, and the increase in that valuation. There's another limit that works on the state property tax, and that relates to the maximum levy rate. And for cities in Washington state, that maximum is $3.60. Since you're also part of a fire district and library district, you have to deduct those levies, and their maximum rates are $1.50 and 50 cents respectively. So your maximum levy rate is actually $1.60, or in current terms, it's $3.60 less whatever levy rates those two jurisdictions have. And because they're not levying at their maximum rates, just like you aren't, you can actually go up to $1.76 in this year's real terms. And then just a quick note, I'll get into this in the next slide, but the city's levy rate is a math problem. The city's levy rate equals the calculated levy rate in the numerator divided by the total assessed value that is determined by the county assessor in the denominator. Getting into that in a little bit more detail, show you how those are all determined, what makes up those amounts. First up is the denominator, the assessed values. And the assessor sets the assessed values at their estimate of market value as of January 1st of 2020. So we're essentially a year behind in terms of the valuations. And last year's assessed value, so the assessed value actually for this year's taxes, 2020's taxes, was just over $476 million. Their total valuation for the 2020 assessed valuation for 2021 taxes is almost $540 million. And the difference includes $32 million worth of appreciation, which works out to about a 6.7% increase in valuation from the base valuation from this year. In addition, significant amounts of new construction, $28.4 million, representing roughly a 6% increase. And the annexations that happened during the year represent another 2.4 million, or roughly 0.5%. And then that state assessed utility infrastructure value that I mentioned earlier, that went up 643,000. So that shows you the differences between this year's assessed valuation and the assessed valuation that's determined for taxes that will be collected next year. So next up is the levy amount. And again, this is sort of a build-up exercise as well. The highest lawful levy, which is actually your starting levy, because it's lower than your current levy. The current levy is $506,660, and it includes some administrative adjustments, collections from prior years, other things that the assessor added. So you're really limited to the highest lawful levy, which is $502,000. 1% increase on that is just over $5,000. You get to collect levy amounts on the new construction that was added, and that is added at the valuation multiplied by last year's levy rate. The same for the utility value, that's another $684. And then annexation gets added to the new property that comes into the city, also gets applied, the city's levy rate gets applied to that valuation for another $2,400. And then there's some additional administrative adjustments of nearly $600 that the assessor will add. You can see the largest share of this, obviously, is the $30,198 from new construction. When you do the math, the numerator of the 541,078, which is the total levy, roughly 39,000 higher than this year, divided by the total assessed value, you get a levy rate for the city of just a tiny bit over $1, and that's a decrease from last year's levy rate of just over $1.06. Got a couple of different slides showing you trends of different aspects of the property tax levy. This is the new construction assessed value. So the blue bar in the left-hand axis is the value of new construction every year. The line in the right-hand axis is the percentage increase over the prior year's assessed value. So you can see pretty much a slowdown during the period before and after the Great Recession, significant lack of new construction activity, picking up in most recent years to this year at 28.3, representing 6% of assessed valuation. First time we've actually exceeded the amount from the last peak back in 2007 of 26.2 million. This slide shows you the levy rate and the actual levy amount for each year. And again, going back to the 2006 time period. And I show this slide to show you that in fact, the levy rate is variable. I guess one of the main takeaways from looking at the Washington state property tax structure is that it is not rate-based. Oregon has a rate-based property tax structure. Washington has a levy-based property tax structure where the assessed value fluctuates, the levy is limited, and the rate is set at the amount needed to collect the determined levy. So you can see over time, the city's property tax levy has increased. There's the 541,000 for next year, an increase over the 506,000 actual levy amount from this year. And the levy rate down to $1, which is the lowest it's been over this time period. You actually had met the $1.60 cap that we mentioned earlier back in 2011 and 2012. And in that period, since your levy was capped, it actually decreased. You weren't able to take the 1% and you were capped at that $1.60 with a declining assessed value, roughly a $6,000 reduction in the levy in those years. Here's a slide that shows you again that same levy rate combined with the bars, the blue bars in the left-hand axis, shows you the appreciation that the assessor determined in, or depreciation in each of those years. And you can see during the run up to the Great Recession, assessed values increased dramatically. And as that denominator in that levy equation increased, the levy rate dropped substantially from $1.53 down to $1.17. On the flip side, the next 5 years, the the assessed value dropped 34%. And you can see the levy rate went up where it was capped for those 2 years. Subsequent to 2013, the assessed values have resumed growing, appreciation of 12% in 2015, 11.2% in 2019. And as a result, the levy rates have dropped accordingly down to where it is currently $1 for next year. This graph shows you the trend in the median home price, and this data comes from the Washington Center for Real Estate Research. Shows you again the impact of the Great Recession on property values, roughly a 9-year period where values didn't achieve their levels back from 2007 until 2016. And you can see the increases subsequent to that date. In this graph, again, the blue bar on the left-hand axis is the median home price. The orange line in the right-hand axis is the annual percent change in that home price. What I've got for you, the last period is the second quarter of 2020 at 388.5. This is the county-wide number. Over in the upper left-hand corner, I show you some information from the Regional Multiple Listing Service and Zillow. The Multiple Listing Service data is as of September 30th. The Zillow data is as of October. Just give you a little bit of flavor for how La Center compares to some of its neighbors, since we don't have that data available from a larger data set. The takeaway is your median home prices seem to be a little bit better than the county-wide average and slightly lower than Ridgefield's and definitely higher than Woodland. Your transactions year to date, closed sales were roughly the same as those in Woodland and less than half what they were in Ridgefield. If you apply that median home price to your levy rate in any given years, you can identify what the median home price, the taxes that were paid to the city of La Center from that median home priced home. And you can see back in 2006 at roughly $363, declining during the Great Recession as your levy rate was capped at that $1.60, and then slowly increasing with the 1% increase over time, but stabilizing over the last 4 years or so. 389,000, slightly more than $1 a day from a home that was valued with an assessed value at that median home price. The city's largest tax revenue source is revenue from the cardroom gambling tax. As I mentioned before, we're estimating that at roughly $975,000 for 2021. It represents at that level 26% of your total revenue, and in prior years at its full amount, estimated at 1.3 million, it would be 36% of your total revenue. So very significant revenue source. This tax rate chart shows you the tax structure that was implemented initially in 2018, but made permanent in 2019. Prior to that point, the tax rate was 10%, and you entered into a graduated tax structure for the card rooms in 2018 and 2019. This graph shows you the revenue from that gambling tax, again, 3.1 million, representing roughly 60% of your revenue in the early 2010 period. And then with the closure of one of the card rooms in 2014 and the subsequent opening of the ALNA casino and closure of the second card room in 2017, revenues dropped to about 1.3 million in 2018 and 19. Because of the closure required for COVID-19, this year's revenues will be about 387,000, and as I mentioned, estimating about 975,000, or roughly 75% of that 1.3 million estimated for next year. Another significant revenue source are utility taxes that the city collects. These were implemented in 2018 in response to that significant reduction in the card room gambling tax. The total revenues from this source will be about 265,000 in estimated for 2021, or roughly 8.6% of total revenue. You can see the largest share comes from the tax on electricity. All of these tax rates, by the way, are at 6%, but the largest on electricity. In the 2021 graph, we show you the addition from the proposed tax on solid waste and recycling. I'll get into that in the next slide at 36,000. Absent that increase, we're looking at a small 4.5% increase year over year, which simply reflects roughly the 8% increase in population. So new homes, new residents paying utilities and also paying utility taxes, but also some rate increases for each of these utilities. If you didn't notice, Northwest Natural, as one of them, has over an 8% increase planned beginning, I think, in November, December. As I mentioned, there's a proposal to add a solid waste and recycling utility tax at 6%. This was inadvertently omitted in the utility taxes when you first implemented them in 2017, effective for 2018. The tax is on the gross revenue of the service provider, but they typically pass that on to the customer. All Clark County cities impose this tax except for Camas. The minimum rate that's imposed by those cities is 10%. The annual revenue of 45,000 to 36,000 is a 9-month estimate. Could in fact be implemented in February, March, potentially earlier, which would increase that revenue estimate accordingly. On a typical household with a 32-gallon garbage service with recycling and yard debris, roughly $28 a month would be $1.70 of additional tax related to this solid waste and recycling tax. Not only applying to households, though, it would apply to all commercial and government customers as well. Just a quick slide to show you the rate comparison for local jurisdictions. There's your proposal at 6%. You can see the rates that are applied in the other jurisdictions. Looking at an Association of Washington Cities survey from this year, the average rate of 9.2%, the median being what you're implementing at 6%, and 141 cities that responded to this survey implement this tax statewide. The sales tax is also a very significant revenue source for the city, representing over 20%. Let me get my slide here just to make sure. Yeah, it's a very significant revenue source. This graph shows you the distribution of the total sales tax that applies in the center of 8.4%. Similarly to the property tax, the city's share of that is 0.85%, so roughly 10% of the sales tax paid in La Center actually goes to the city of La Center. The state of Washington is the sort of the Pac-Man image here, roughly 77% of the total at 6.5%. And you can see the other jurisdictions, CTRAN, Clark County, being the primary other beneficiaries of the sales tax. When we look at the sales tax, there's really a significant portion of that, 25 to 35%, that comes from new construction. It's a large generator of the city's sales tax. So this graph shows you the sales tax revenue by year from both the city's sales tax, the blue bar, and then the city also benefits from a countywide criminal justice sales tax. There's 1/10 of a cent that's collected from all jurisdictions that's distributed primarily based on population. If you look at the 2021 budget, the amounts are $456,000 and $67,000 from the local criminal justice tax. That's down from $523,000 and $64,000 in 2020. Again, the reduction in the city's share is from assumptions that include a slowdown in new development, new single-family development in 2021 versus 2020. Also included in these increases you see from 19 to 20 and into 2021 is the estimated sales tax associated with the construction of the new middle school. So again, just hitting on quickly on other revenue sources, licenses and permits. We talked about that before. The estimate is based on 60 new single-family residential units and 72 multifamily units. Got an update today from community development staff. We're at 135, I think, plus actually 3 more today. So you're at 138 new single-family permits as of today. Intergovernmental, you will once again be eligible for state assistance payment, although at a much lower level. We're looking at your 2020 revenue from this revenue source at being roughly $78,000, and it'll go down to about $34,500 next year. Other things to note, the transfer from the sewer utility for debt repayment is $400,000, an increase of $100,000 over this year. And we're including interest on your reserve fund this year, estimated at $30,000. So that's the revenues from the general fund. Quickly wanted to hit on revenues for your sewer and stormwater utilities. For the 6th year in a row, the sewer rate will not go up at $66 per month. New development and efficiencies have improved the long-term forecast for the sewer utility. And with this revenue in 2021 and projected, there are some rate increases in the longer-term forecast included. But that revenue should be sufficient to fund the general fund debt repayment and the required plant expansion over the next 20 years. Your stormwater utility fee will increase 20 cents or 2% this year under a 3-year plan that was adopted when you formed the utility back in 2019. and those revenues will go to fund additional stormwater maintenance and rehabilitation activities. Just for reference point, the statewide median utility rate is $12.09, so a couple dollars, $2 higher than your rate will be for 2021. So as I mentioned, this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for the public to comment on the revenue sources and the property tax levy. There'll be a subsequent opportunity for public comment on the solid waste utility tax when that ordinance is presented to you on December 2nd. And also at that meeting, there'll be an opportunity for public comment on the city's proposed budget, which will be presented to you, to City Council for consideration on December 2nd. Just a quick summary of the property tax ordinance, ordinance 2020-04. Again, it's proposing a 1% increase in the property tax levy from the actual levy from this year, the actual levy of $506,660. So the 1% increase would be $5,066.60. If you paid attention earlier, you'll notice that that's really not the full amount that you're able to collect. On a 1% increase, you'll be limited by your highest lawful levy, which was that $502,000 I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, one of the peculiarities of the state property tax law requires us to propose an increase based on 1% increase based on the current year property tax levy. So Mayor, that closes the public hearing, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Great presentation. Appreciate all your hard work. Again, this is a public hearing, so before I open it up for public comment, are there any questions for Mr. Lewis from the council or comments before I open it up for public comment?
Paul, this is Randy. Just the 1% increase is not on the property tax bill. It's only on the city's property tax. Is that correct?
So the 1% increase is on the city's levy amount. So that's that $500,000. So it'll go up $5,000. What happens on any individual household really depends on what happened to their assessed value, and it's only on the city's share. So if you remember, it's
that's what I wanted to make sure. I want to make sure everybody understood that it wasn't a 1% increase on the property tax bill, but a 1% increase on the city's levy rate.
Correct. So we're roughly 10% of the total. It'd be 1/10 of 1% increase on the total bill.
Yeah. I don't want to scare people thinking their tax is going to go up that much. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council before I open up the public hearing? Okay, not hearing any more questions. It is now 8:05. I will open it up for public comment. If anybody would like to comment on this update, please, on this ordinance, please state your name and address. And if you could limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Mayor, I think they're all muted.
Yeah, I've pressed unmute all, so it'll be up to the people to unmute themselves if they would like to speak.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Okay, I'm not hearing any questions or seeing any movement here. Well, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and open it back up to the council. Once again, if there are any questions, comments. Okay, so very good, Paul. I appreciate the presentation. Again, we also have the property tax ordinance in front of us. Paul, do you have any more to present on that, or?
No, just a brief introduction. The ordinance, as I mentioned, includes a 1% increase in the property tax levy. The increase is stated in both dollar and percentage terms. It's based off of the actual levy for 2020. which was the $506,660. And that 1% increase is in addition to the increases that are allowed for new construction, annexations, and increases to state assessed utility infrastructure. The staff recommendation is that council approve the ordinance 2020-04 and approving the 1% increase in the city's property tax levy.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any comments or questions on the ordinance, property tax ordinance 2020-04?
I think Paul's done a good job laying everything out there. It's very clear.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, could I get a motion?
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 2020-04, an ordinance to establish the ad valorem taxes necessary to finance the anticipated requirements of the city of La Center, Washington for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2021 by increasing property tax revenue from the previous year.
Second.
And moved and seconded to adopt property tax ordinance 2020-04. This is an ordinance. If I get a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Boff,
Yes.
Councilmember Williams,
Yes.
Councilmember Stroven,
No.
Councilmember Cerveny.
Yes.
The ordinance passes by a vote of 3-1. Thank you, council. Again, I want to thank you, Paul, for your presentation, all your hard work on this. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the Budget Advisory Committee that's worked with the council on advancing the budget this year, and the staff's hard work as well. So, job well done. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is adjournment. That is all that we have this evening. If I could get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries at 8:10. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you again, everyone, and have a safe and happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, good night.
Thanks, everyone. You too.